Well, welcome to another whiteboard video. I'll stick my head in. You've probably seen my head before. So one of the most common stumbling blocks in spiritual progress is caused by the mind trying to work out its position, its place in the universe, in time, in space, in eternity, relative to God, all of that sort of stuff. Ultimately, through the experience of the illumination or the enlightenment of your mind, you realize that you don't have a position relative to God, that's actually what you are. You are, pardon me, part of God. And if you're a Star Wars fan, when Yoda dies and Obi-Wan Kenobi dies in the flesh, they rejoin the Force, which is pretty much God, the life force of all things. Forget about the bit where they come back as ghosts or images and sort of, I'm not going to poo-poo on that, but, Hollywood. So I wanted to use the whiteboard, and I can't, my phone doesn't have a zoomy thing, so I can try and use as much of it as possible. I might be able to turn it this way, actually. That probably makes no difference at all. Anyway, I wanted to use the whiteboard just to try and portray, in a conscious sense, the nature of separation. Because once you understand the nature of separation, the position that you find yourself with, and you kind of do need to work this out for yourself, the position you find yourself within, in the framework of your salvation, which is the process of healing, right? Salvation is a process, not beyond immediate learning, but generally, as it says in the Course in Miracles, it's a slowly evolving training program. It is a process. Right? Technically, the process is the reinterpretation of your defense mechanisms so that what you once defended yourself against as perceived to be a threat becomes reinterpreted as a lesson in life, a lesson in the universal curriculum. And even though it may bring up all that emotionality that the threat connotation that it had before presented to you, which forged the defense, you'll get to be able to look at it differently and make a new choice about it every time it comes around in your learning cycle, because a lesson repeats until it's learned. And hopefully you'll make the decision to be still and allow the divine nature of your higher self to intercede for you at the point where the trigger or the block seems to show up in the particular relationship. And all you need to do is simply be still and allow for something miraculous to happen. And we call it miraculous because the potential to be able to understand it in your conscious mind is impossible. If you can understand the technique, you can understand the principle, but you can't understand how it actually happens, because how it actually happens isn't contained in consciousness. It's contained in your higher mind, or your eternal, the eternal part of your beingness, for want of a better term, but is also experienced in the world in your own physical incarnation, let's say, even though technically you're not actually here at all right now watching this video, and I'm not making this video, but that's a Fruit Loop of a conundrum to try and work out in your pointy little brain. So we won't go there for a second. We'll just look at the idea of separation. Right, and that's as good enough starting point as there is, without trying to get into the paradox of things too much. But anyway, and you've got to have a sense of humor about it, because at a certain point you're going to realize you're doing all this to yourself, and that's when the joke gets really funny. And if you think that it's not a joke, that life is not a joke, there's people dying of cancer and people dying in war and planets exploding in interstellar cosmic happenings, and it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. And people shoot me down all the time because I cannot take anything seriously because the truth has dawned upon my mind. And I try, whilst I do acquiesce to the idea sometimes, if I get a devoted student or somebody who shows a lot of promise, I will allow them to become subdued temporarily by the nature of their own dementia, just in order, however, that I can begin to posture an alternative way to look at it, which is what we're talking about here. And whilst most people like in that situation are not particularly grateful to me for that on this side of the shifting consciousness, on the other side of the shifting consciousness, it's like, oh, that was the most incredible thing that ever happened in my life. You know, it's like, man, you ain't seen nothing yet. You have not seen nothing. So a shifting consciousness is nothing. That's just like, it's a paltry beginning for an astral being or a divine celestial participant in the universal, whatever the fuck this is. So anyway, here's my whiteboard. This represents eternity. Into eternity, where all is one, crept a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. You'll have to try and imagine that eternity doesn't have a black frame around it. It just goes on forever and ever in all dimensions, in all areas, in all ways and everything. And there's nothing you can do about it, even if you wanted to. But that's where you actually are, because God creates in its own image and God is eternal. Therefore, the eternal nature of God's creation must be your nature also, if it creates in its own image. And I say it, I could say he, wouldn't really matter in the end. I mean, you find out when you find out. But eternity, all of a sudden, tiny mad idea. Now, I know you're going to want to ask me, if everything's just all the one thing, how can there be something else like a tiny mad idea? But let's put it in here anyway. There it is. There's our tiny mad idea. Right? God, right, which is life. Let's call it life instead of God. We don't have to use the God word. Some people tell me, oh, I don't like that word because of the religious connotations. I understand religion's done a piss poor job of trying to explain life, the universe and everything for thousands of years, at least in the West. Tiny mad idea. Now, biblically, we can refer to this idea as the fall from grace, the separation, which is what I like to call it, the original sin or the original error, as Jesus calls it in the Course in Miracles. And I think this pen's getting up my nose, but no, it's not. It's one of those... It's just a very strong smell. It's not one of those, I don't think it's one of those ones that makes you go funny. I'm already kind of funny. It's all very funny. Tiny mad idea. Now within that, right, you can hypothesize that because the tiny mad idea is in God, which is mind, right? So God is the Hebrew word, is the Hebrew word translated into, God, I've got to get my translations here. Wait a minute. Allah translated into Hebrew. Or did I go backwards there? Anyway, but it means I am, right? The Hebrew translation of the word God, that's what I'm trying to get out of my mouth, means I am, right? So we'll just put this, I am. It's the whole thing, right? Or we can just put it as God is. And you'll probably say to me, God is what? What do you mean God is? And you could even shorten that again and just put is. The great infinite is. You can't define it, right? It just is. There's no way to put all of eternity, and if I just rub the tiny mad idea out for a second, pardon me, you can't put it into a bracket or into a category, because there would have to be other things, other categories in there for you to be able to say that all of this is this, 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 this. It's not. It just is what it is, right? Otherwise, that's separation again. So even to say it is, I mean, but we're going to talk about it just as something. So just to give us a starting point here. All of you particularly conscientious spiritual persons out there who like to be particularly correct about things, we're just going to rub that out for you so you don't have a conniption about it. My conniption. So into eternity where all is one, and I'm going to reference Course in Miracles, correct, a tiny mad idea, the fall from grace, separation, blah, blah, blah. As I said before, there it is. All right, there's the tiny mad idea. And within that tiny mad idea, God mind, let's say, sends in souls, angels, we'll just put etc., all of the heavenly host, right, to investigate the idea. Now, if you were to study the Aramaic, right, which is the actual language Jesus spoke, and look up the definition of the word souls, I mean, when we say souls here in the West, in Australia anyway, or in English-speaking lands, we tend to somehow, and this is just that I've picked up along the way, because I've never really had an idea about souls other than being major expressions of God as an extension of itself. And if you've ever had a divine experience of direct union with God, you will have seen the great rays that extend out from God, which are not separate from God. And this is where you can't talk about it. You can't, because it seems like there are rays and that there is a God, but the God is the rays at the same time. It's like the sun and the rays that come from the sun, but God is nothing like the sun. God is more like a pinpoint. And even that is a terrible, terrible, terrible way to try and even talk about it. So I'm just going to shut up and not try to talk about it, because everything I try to tell you, you're going to want to twist it and manipulate it into something you think you can understand for the purposes of building a better defense against it. And why? Because you're in here. And I'll just take these out for a second. I'm not sure where I was going with those, but imagine here's the body, right? And there's 8 billion of us, let's say, for argument's sake, in all sorts of millions of dimensions, infinite almost. Can't be entirely infinite, because then it would be all-encompassing, but reasonably infinite, more than you could count in an infinite number of lifetimes. And within those, let's just say for argument's sake, 8 billion in each one of those, all having similar experiences, right? Looking at, pardon me, I got the hiccups, looking at the idea of the potential that is contained within the idea, the tiny mad idea, which I don't know how to draw time and space, but I'm just going to do a circular sort of thing here that goes around behind, and there's an arrow. Hope that's clear. Anyway, looking at the potential contained within all of the cycles, because all of this is contained. It doesn't matter where you start here and where you end up going, you always come back to where you start, right? It doesn't matter how many dimensions you traverse. It doesn't matter how many states you find yourself experiencing a various avatar manifestation in, all that sort. It doesn't matter, right? Everything that is not this is contained in the tiny mad idea of separation. Right? Now, in the Course, I'm not going to argue with Jesus. In the Course, channeled from Jesus through Helen Schuckman, and I've had people tell me some other weird thing. Oh, no, it wasn't through Helen, it was through this. It's like, please watch the story of A Course in Miracles with Bill Thetford, who's actually Helen's past, but Bill tells the story very admirably. Yes, it was Jesus. Yes, it was through Helen. No, it wasn't from a whole bunch of other books or what. It doesn't matter what you think about it. It doesn't matter what the Pope says, the Catholic Church says, whatever. You're listening to a video by somebody who had a direct experience of union with God, out of the body, no world, no body, no universe, no nothing, immediate immersion into the eternal Godhead of love, and came back to this world to be given by the very first person he saw a copy of A Course in Miracles, which made perfect sense of the experience that I just had. He just had, I just had, the old me that was a Dave, which is now the Christ talking through the old avatar of what would once have been Dave, which for all intensive purposes we still call Dave, because what difference does it make? I'm not like someone who just wants to run off to India so I can change my name and put on an orange robe. I'm just Dave. So everything, all potential for examining, let's say there you are there, little one, examining the idea of limitation or the idea of the parameters that make up time and space. All right? And it just goes around and around and around. Everything is contained within here. All your spiritual work's contained within here, all your marriages, births, deaths. But none of this is reality. It's not reality. That's reality. Eternal truth is reality. It can never be changed. It's a constant. It's always there. It's the one thing that never changes. Right? Into eternity, where all things are one, crept a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. There it is. All of a sudden, God mind realizes, right? Now, you're going to ask me, how does something that's one thing have a realization if the realization would have to be of something other than itself? Very good question. No real answer. But I'm just going to phrase it this way. All right? God mind realizes something. Right? Now, we're talking about the mind of God. We're not talking about the mind of a Dave or a whoever you are that you think you are listening to this video. We're talking about the mind of God, the universal creative force of all things. And I think, if I can remember correctly, the idea of mind is the Greek word, which mind comes from the Greek, which means to think and to remember, right? Which is obviously consciousness, because what would God think about if God is everything, right? But translated mind, which is from the Greek, mind is, where are we? Where am I going with this? Oh, I think I just lost it. God is mind, God is spirit. Oh, there we go, spirit. So from the Greek, psyche, mind, same thing, to the Latin, which is spirit, right? So God is spirit. In here, within the framework of the dream, in the West, spirit we think of as something separate from ourselves in some kind of a way, like our spirit is something that abides in God, abides with God, or it is a higher part of our self, but it still considers that this physical self is real and spirit is a part of it, right? It doesn't consider that spirit is the whole thing. This is all mind, okay? Consciousness, the universe, the universes of universes, it's all consciousness. It's all one thing. It's the outward picturing, right, from within. Let's say, I've got a very surprised look. it's the outward picturing of what is being experienced in eternity as knowing something is happening here, right? But witnessed to through the avatar, right? So it's literally, if God had eyeballs, I'm just going to imagine for a second, there's some big divine God-style eyeballs. I don't know if they look godly enough. They look a bit cross-eyed, but God is actually looking into the dreaming here, not knowing what any of this is within it. I mean, in here there's houses, there's little puppy dogs, like that. There's all sorts of stuff. God doesn't know what any of this stuff is. All God knows is love, right? But God looks out, because God is omnipotent, through these eyes, but these eyes have been convinced, or the little brain in here reacts to everything in here as if this is reality, because it can't see beyond its limitations. It doesn't know. It doesn't have any remembrance of what it is that it was before it was born, and it doesn't know what's going to happen to it after it dies, right? Now, technically, there's no birth and there's no death. You're eternal. This whole thing just goes around and around and around, and this avatar bites the dust, and what do you know? Another one comes and imagines itself to have its own identity, like there, and build its own life and its own story, and God calls and calls and calls all the time to these avatars, to all of them, to open their eyes and awaken to the fact that there's something fundamentally going on here that not only initially doesn't make any sense, but two, tends to point to the fact that none of this is actually reality. Right? And I don't know if I'm doing a really great job with my picture work and explanation of this today, but so all of this is an idea in the mind of God, right? Now, let's say when we talk about someone as being awakened, not woke, not like Greta Thunberg and all these woke people that think that they're going to save the planet, which obviously here's our little tiny planet as a speck in the tiny mad idea, and you want to try and save it from this, because that's ultimately what you're trying to save it from, right? Everything within the framework of the tiny mad idea is within the framework of ego, right? This is the domain of ego. The purpose of ego, right, given it by God, by God mind, by the sleeping God mind, or this part which represents the idea of a sleep, right? The purpose of it all is to not only try to understand and perfect its mastery of the domain, but to perpetuate it, right? It doesn't want to go back to this. Not only does it not want to go back to this, it doesn't really even know about this, because it also is the manifestation, or part of the manifestation. It's like the cause and effect, right? Ego, or I'll put tiny mad idea, which is, we'll call it ego for short, which is not really for short because it's still 3 letters in both words. Ego is what we call the tiny mad idea. It's an idea of separation, something that exists apart from God, which is impossible if God is everything and all encompassing. There can't be something else, right? Therefore, man, planets, trees, stars can't possibly exist, right? It's a mental projection, a mental thought, a mental atrophy in the mind of God. It's a dense light association of thought that has taken form and seems to appear to itself as something which includes me as, let's say, a pioneer or an adventurer, an explorer might be better, who's starting to look at it from a different perspective now, having had an experience of, and that was pretty apt that I broke the circle there, of being outside of it for a second and then coming back in to say what I saw. Right? And a lot of people have done that. All right. So Saul on the road gets converted, by a sudden. He's a persecutor of the disciples and anyone that follows Jesus and talks bad things about them. All of a sudden on the road to wherever the heck he was going, not Galilee, Saul on the road to Damascus? I can't remember. Suddenly has an experience of hearing God speak to him and an experience of the illuminate presence of God, who tells him, stop persecuting my true disciples and whatever he says. God says something profound anyway. And he suddenly has a revelation. He converts to Christianity and he becomes Paul, one of the main disciples of Jesus. But I hope I got that story right for all you biblical fanatics out there. It's something along the... I wish I could remember where he was going. Anyway, I'm sure this pen's not toxic, but feeling a bit lightheaded in this video. Anyway, salvation comes along. All of a sudden, God's like, my son sleeps and must be awakened, or my creation, there's something wrong with my creation, we need to fix it, right? It doesn't matter how you express it. And God himself decides, I'm going to give myself an avatar and appear within the framework of whatever this is and see what the heck is going on, right? So God being omnipotent, and this is like when you have an experience of enlightenment, right? If you're a non-dual person, you say, well, there's no experiencer. It's impossible to have that experience because you don't exist to have the experience in the first place, which is just such a crock of shit, right? So you have the experience, right? In the course it says some will see it on point of death, others will experience it in relation to the workbook, etc. You have the experience. For a second, you are validated in the form, in the flesh, as well as remembering what it is you are there, right? You can't just rule the flesh out and the body out because it is a manifestation of light, whether you like it or not, right? Jesus says in the Course, the opposite of life is not death, it's another form of life. If it was just death and there is no death because everything is eternal, you could just rule it out. Well, there is no body. You could just sit in that and push it as hard as you can until you popped out the other side of consciousness where you had no body. And you can do that. Some people do it. If you're familiar with the monastic nuns in, what are they? They're Buddhist nuns. I think primarily nuns, and they practice this form of rainbow meditation where they dissipate into rainbow light through pushing through the threshold of consciousness. You can do some weird, crazy shit. And the more you hang around spiritual circles of people, you'll start to realize that things aren't the way you always thought they were. But anyway, in comes God through the manifestation of, let's see if I can do a bit of a Jesus-looking fella here, through the manifestation of Jesus with his robe. And give him a halo because he's divine. And Jesus walks around and goes, there you are. Here you all are, all you 8 billion, like you were all these beautiful beings of light that they didn't have any form, of course, in creation. And we wondered where you went. And then it's so funny. Here you are. Here you are in this bubble, in this tiny mad idea, and you've been going crazy in here trying to explore the parameters of it and figure out why everything is the way it is and You've developed this thought system, this dualistic thought system of yin and yang, which is, if you're a fan of the Tao, I'm very sorry, which is the problem. It's not the solution. There's nothing more unstable than the notion of balance. You can't balance day and night, the good and the bad, the right and wrong. All you can do is abolish that whole thought system and just be yourself, right? There is no good, there is no bad, there's no right, there's no wrong. There's no day, there's no night, because none of this is actually so. And that's where you hold your mind, in that place of beingness, which is a place of stillness, so that you can be still and know that I'm God, which is Jesus' teaching. So you can be still, stop interacting with the dream for a second, whatever that looks like, and go where Jesus is telling you he went. All of a sudden, I don't know if I could draw a transfigured Jesus. All of a sudden, Jesus transfigures into light. There's his robe and there's his little halo. Oh, I still left his halo there. And his little feet. And he sort of vanishes, or he ascends and vanishes into light. And he says, where I'm going, you're going to go, right? Just like the Buddhist nuns who practice rainbow meditation. I think that's what it's called, rainbow meditation. And everybody down here is gobsmacked. They're like, wow, did you see that? That guy died, 3 days later came back and then said, watch this. If you think that's good, watch this. And off he goes, right? And he says, now practice forgiveness, which is the release of the habituation with basically temporal association, trying to find an answer to something within here. There's no answer to something within here, because all of this is impossible. It's impossible. If God is everything, it can't possibly exist. And there we are, arriving at the paradox, P for paradox, right? It can't possibly exist, but it seems to exist, right? Now, there's no point wandering around in denial, trying to persecute the paradox and figure it out and just getting yourself wedged into it more and more tightly. I mean, do it if you want. But it makes no sense. Let's just deal with things as if, for a second, we'll accept from Jesus that's impossible. If God is everything, how can there be an idea of separation from God? What's going to be separate if it's everything, right? So we'll just accept when Jesus says that's impossible. Buddha says that's impossible. Krishna says that's impossible, right? All the same message, all the same prophets, Isaiah, bloody Zoroaster, just whatever, Ramana Maharshi, right? It's impossible. But there's no point trying to live your life from the impossibility of it, right? Salvation, because that would be impossible. You're verifying the impossible by trying to do that, right? It's like people that try to prove they're not a body by that they are the spirit by refusing to eat and things like that. Well, you're actually proving you are the body, if you can hear that. Going on fasts and things to purify and toxify that which you think you are as the body, which, when you come from spirit, when you make this connection higher to lower, it takes care of everything for you. All of your concerns about your body here fall away. They all fall away from you. You don't need any of them. Medicine, economics, nothing. Health, reciprocal relationships. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no sick, there's no healthy, there's nothing. Because you're praying, let's say initially, you pray for the Holy Spirit to join you, which is the spirit of wholeness, the Holy Spirit, to join you, which is, in essence, a practice of praying with all of your heart, might, and power and soul. I'll draw a little heart in there. And a happiness, because prayer should always be happy. Some people's prayers are miserable. Help me, God, miserable sinner. So you're not a miserable sinner. You didn't know what was going on in here. You're not responsible. You're not blamed for anything in here. Remember, this is insanity. This is sanity. Reality is sanity. And I'm just going to put it this way for a second. Reality is sanity. Everything in here is insanity. Buddha said all life is suffering, right, within the framework of the earth. Buddhism believes that this is what this is without the manifest form, which in essence it is, right? But it's part of a greater thing. And you're going to say to me, well, how can it be part of a greater thing? Prove that it's part of a greater thing. And I can prove that it's part of a greater thing because it's already part of a lesser thing. When you look at the idea of the universe in its entirety, it doesn't matter where you go or what you do, you're contained. You can't get out beyond the stars, right? That's it. You're stuck here. Unless you've got a Blue Origin rocket ship and some pop stars, you might be able to pop out for a second to a nearby planet. Anyway, so you're getting distracted. I'm sure it's the pen. So you have this thing, this channel, right there, and it just sort of opens up to everything here. And when you pray, right, so you're praying here, you got your eyes closed, praying, and your prayer, which is an energy, it's a resonant signal, goes out here and says, hey. And nature, which abhors a vacuum, Albert Einstein, God, which abhors a vacuum, because God, there's no lack in God, no emptiness in God, God is everything, automatically reminds you that you are one with all things and fills the idea of whatever it is you're saying hey about and praying about, right? Which then, because your mind is manifesting the reality it sees and has implemented prayer, begins to see the result of its prayer through its manifestations. It's like adding an extra ingredient in a cake. All of a sudden, you begin to taste that extra ingredient. It's like, it's nice with raisins. You know, makes it taste better. Silly old plain pound cake, but put some raisins in it and I'll have a slice. So, where are we going here? All right, so every time then you pray, more prayer, eventually what happens is the witnesses that you see outside of yourselves, which shows up as ideas of healing my situation in this regard over here, in that regard over there, this relationship, this situation over here, this one's fucked, I need a prayer. They're all fucked in here because this is pain, remember? And we're all doing our best to not feel the pain. All of a sudden I'm saying, no, fuck that, I realise it's all pain, I'm going to feel it, I'm just going to let myself be all fucked up, right? And you pray. Eventually what happens is the witnesses to your prayer start to show up in such a regular occurrence, in such a regular way, that you can no longer doubt that there is a higher power or something else going on because you've been employing faith through prayer. You can no longer doubt that there's some other kind of thing happening here, that even though you can't put your finger on it and remember what all this is out here because you're still circumscribed by with being within this tiny mad idea, you can at least get to the point of acknowledging the presence of something, a higher power. We'll call it a higher power. It's actually what you are. All right. So, love this whiteboard. Thanks, Carl and Deb. So you've acknowledged the presence of a higher power. All of a sudden, you've gone from a dream of devastation and separation, right, which is the effects of the manifest idea of the tiny mad idea within here, which is like you're questioning what the hell's going on. All of a sudden, you've been praying so much, you're starting to get an idea of what's going on. It's like, aha, right, exclamation mark. You're like, aha, I see. I've fallen into this cosmic hole, this cosmic idea, tiny mad idea. It's engaged me to a nth degree where I'm continually in the process of looking at my own thoughts reflected outside of myself. Let's say I've got these thoughts going on in here, looking at all those thoughts showing up as relationships and situations out here, right? My state of mind here determines what it is that I see out in the world. I then look at that and judge it, and I get the results of that judgment by reinforcing my state of mind, right? but it actually comes from me first. I project it out there. It's not someone else out there doing something to me. I've projected onto them what I want to see and the part I want them to play for me based on the state of mind that I'm hanging on to, which is within this frame of mind in here, which is pain, suffering, and death. Life is pain, says the Buddha. Right? And within that, you're going to say to me, oh, well, it's not just pain. There's love and there's everything else. Yes, but it's all conditional. It's all limited. And it's all within here. Anything within here. It's not real love. It's an idea of love, but it's not, you know, like it's about as good as it gets here. When you get out here and you remember, not that you can get out, but when you awaken to what's here, you'll understand that love here is just this tiniest, you know, any happiness you can have in relationship to the cause and effect nature of your own experience in the world is so intrinsically paltry. My teacher used to say to me, it's a poor excuse for a home for a child of God or something like that. This little mud ball spinning in space that we call Earth, you know, and like everyone's trying to save it. It's quite bizarre, you know. It's one of the things that I laugh at a lot, the old Greta Thunberg. Trying to save something that doesn't exist. You've had 1,000 lifetimes, Greta. Don't worry about it. You'll have 1,000 more. But if we just save this planet, you know, like, because you look out there and you see dead planet, dead planet, dead planet. Oh, this one's special. This one's got life on it. I guarantee you there's trillions of planets out there with life on them. But they're all contained within here, and they're all involved in this great cosmic occurrence called salvation, which is the complete redemption of this tiny mad idea and the full restoration of God mind, which has already occurred. Ta-da! In the very moment that this seemed to exist or was thought of in God mind. Now remember, we're talking about God mind, not Dave mind or Brian mind or Judy mind or anything. God mind. It's incomprehensible, right? In the moment this seems to exist, whoop, gone again. And in all of eternity, like you're looking at this thing and it's like, no, and it just gets smaller. No, smaller. The further you walk away from it, until it's just this tiny dot, and then you can't even see it. It's like if I drew a dot there on this line, and this line went all the way as far as you could see to the end of the earth and the end of the earth back, and you walk to the end of the earth that way and look, you wouldn't even see that dot, right? That's denial, though. If I were to do that, I mean, I would still know that the dot was there. But rather, or transcendence, you know, it's like transcending the problem, which is basically what Buddhism is. Sorry, all you Buddhists out there. We don't want to transform. We don't want to transcend. We want to transform. So we're transforming through prayer. All of this, healing the mind that once looked out here and saw things and thought this was real, to realizing this is just a symbolic representation. Whatever's going on out here within the framework, in all these different relationships, is just a symbolic representation of my own thought processes that are only verifying this with everything within it. Right? They can't tell me what I truly am because I'm actually part of this. I'm actually part of the whole. Right? And then as you withdraw, let's say we reclaim our power. That's a popular term people like. I'm taking back my power. And it's true in a sense. You're taking back your power. You're repurposing your power to serve you rather than to give it away for pointless, endless means. Then your interaction with this out here begins to fall away, and you find yourself that you become in the world, but no longer attracted or interested in any of it. You're in the world, but not of it. Right? That's about as far as you can go prior to and pre-revelation, which is having this whole mind-blowing, illuminating, enlightenment experience, which then completely restores the memory of God, even while you're in the dream, the memory of what this is as a whole, without you in it, without anything in it. But it is also experienced within the dream, because consciousness, it's also experienced here, right? What's out here, because consciousness isn't separate from everything else. It's still part of it. But once you're within consciousness, once you're within the tiny mad idea, or you seem to find yourself within the tiny mad idea, as God looking into the dream, no longer confused by it, making the repair, and then getting smaller until it no longer exists. So for an instant it was there, and then gone, before you can even say, what was that, right? In the Bible, Jesus says, in the twinkling of an eye, right? Now, little twinkle, that was it. In time and space, however, that seems to last for billions of years, that twinkle, because we're talking about eternity. Time is different in eternity. I mean, there's no time in eternity, right? So eternity obviously means there is no time, right? And it says that in the Course as well. But where was I going with that? I took the lid off this pen, and now I'm sure there should be some warning on this pen, I'm sure. Dry wipe without ghosting. That's all it says. Dry wipe without ghosting. It's getting up my nose. Makes me cough as well. Good job, Carl and Deb. Got the cheap pens. So eventually what happens is you're in the world, but not of it. Everything else is still going on out here, but there's nothing that links you to it, right? This becomes the predominant factoring, and you become, let's say, a representative of this out here, because you've had an experience of it, much like myself doing the best job I can given circumstances. You become a representative of that within this. And then everybody else out here, previously that didn't have a representative, begins to sort of like, oh, what's that? What's going on here? This guy's different. Why isn't he interested in all this kind of stuff that we're interested in? What does he know we don't know? But it's automatic. There doesn't even need to be questions, right? So your vibe that you give off goes out there, and then it comes back to you over this side, and it begins to affect everything, right? And I think it was John Adidar Samaranch who said there only needs to be a dozen enlightened minds in the world. If you could get them all to meditate at once, it would affect the complete paradigm of time and space, to a point that it was impossible for other minds and for anything within the framework of that to reject the vibration, right? It's like in a physical body, if it develops cancer or whatever, it begins to affect everything, right? In our case, our cancer, thankfully, is salvation. I don't make it sound very nice that way, but it's salvation, and it begins to affect everything. Case in point, let's say 2,000 odd years ago, when Jesus was here in his robe and everything, and he was talking to people, he introduced the idea of forgiveness. Right? Prior to which it was an eye for an eye, right? That changed everything. That put a whole new idea into the human thought system that wasn't there before, right? It was an official forgiveness. It was officially sanctioned by God. It was part of a plan for the redemption of mankind, etc. Right. Also, what happened was the calendar. and there's, let's say, 12 months. All of a sudden, it went from BC to AD because this guy transfigured into light and broke the code of death. All of a sudden, the teaching that there is no death, which was Jesus, there is no death, 4 simple words, book of Matthew, there is no death, all right? BC to AD. I don't think there's anything I've done in my life that's ever that's going to make BC to AD. I can see that up there. And I'm pretty sure there's nothing going to ever happen in your life that's going to crack the calendar and start our lives all over again because of some incredible event that happened. You know, the coming of the prophet, the coming of the Savior and all of that, the prophesied one. So, essentially, Jesus came to end man's time of suffering, right? To end the time of all things visible, to end everything within here, to bring it to a close, so that you don't have to keep going around for thousands and thousands more incarnations. And I know Buddhism teaches, after 14 incarnations, if you meditate, do this, do that, and live right and think right, and all of those eightfold path or whatever, you will achieve enlightenment. It's not true. It's not up to the particulars of man's efforts or man's strength of will to break out of those cycles at all. There has to be this whole occurrence, higher to lower. There has to be not only the illumination, which is enlightenment, I'll just call it EN up there, enlightenment, which is the memory of God restored to you, which is actually in your mind. It's not contained in consciousness, but it's, let's say it's contained here in mind, in the borderland between the worlds and between the experiences. But you have to have these ongoing incursions or intercessions of light, which we'll call holy instants. I should have been a doctor. Holy instants. To do the work of healing the attachment and the whatever to grievances, which is what this whole symbol represents. It represents a grievance against God. Don't want to get into that right now. You can look at it as the fall or the war in heaven, whatever you want to look at that as. To break the fascination with it, it's a mental fascination, so that the mind can become singular in its perception of itself, the conscious mind, because we're retraining the conscious mind. We don't need to retrain the whole mind. The whole mind's fine. But this part within here, conscious mind, we're retraining it to think of itself this way, out here, not this way, all these things in here. Right? But also retraining it to see with the vision of Christ, Krishna consciousness, the Buddha vision, whatever, Buddha-mindedness, but also to see all these things out here as not separate from yourself. I'm one with all things. In eternity, as above, so on earth, here within the dream, within the framework of the experience of the tiny mad idea that was over in the instant that it began, never having actually began. Paradox, won't get into it. The only way out of the paradox is a miracle, because the paradox itself is impossible, and the miracle is the anti-impossible that shows you that it's impossible, which doesn't free you from participating within there, but it gives you a new waypoint out here where you can begin to make decisions in here that affect all of this relative to that, rather than relative to what you think you had to choose from before as alternatives within the framework of the dream, which is nothing more than potential to suffer, because life is suffering. So the Buddha, all of this is suffering, everything within it is suffering, including the idea of balance, which is the yin-yang of the Tao, or the way, right? I mean, even Buddha taught the straight path. Not this, not that. Neti, neti. You know. So we don't want any of this. We don't want any of that. Get rid of that. That's outdated, old news. Didn't work. It worked up until the point we realized it doesn't work at all, because you have to factor this in out here. You know. And I have friends who are Buddhists who, every time I explain this to them, they sort of cringe at me. And it's like I just tell them, just keep going, keep questioning everything, which is what Buddha actually taught. Buddha didn't tell you to settle for some religious perspective. He said question everything, including everything he taught you. And I'm telling you the same thing, question everything, including everything I'm telling you. But because mind is always awakening, mind is always raising up, right? It's headed back to God, not away from God, right? The universe has been expanding, now it's coming back in, let's say, as an idea of energetics. Not that you'll see that in the picturing yet, because light takes a long time to, you know, from the edge of the universe to the retina of your eye is trillions of years. As far as you're concerned, it's still expanding away from you. I guarantee you that's not true. I forgot where I was going with that, but, you know, God only gives. The salvation is always offering more. So here I am as a representative in the year, let's say 2025, having had an experience of the illumination of my mind in 1997 or whatever it was, and grounding that through the application of the principles of A Course in Miracles, which is basically forgiveness, tolerance, patience, acceptance, and all of those things, which are just basic spiritual stuff. But with a different twist. If you're talking about forgiveness, recognizes that what you think someone did to you, it didn't actually occur, because that doesn't occur. But here I am in 2025 with hopefully a slightly more elevated slant on things than, 6,000 years BC when we were taught about the Tao, the Way by Lao Tzu. And, it's like the Gitas and the Upanishads and the Bible, even to some extent, especially the Old Testament. Jesus came to fulfill the law of the Old Testament and brought with him the new covenant, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, power and soul, and your neighbour as yourself. That's not very difficult, is it? But yet we still cling to the old stuff. 1,000 years from now, there's going to be somebody comes along, a new teacher, because we're out of the time of the prophets now. We're into the time of the teachers, right? The teachers are teaching a very specific version of the universal curriculum, which is taught through A Course in Miracles, which is the embodiment of the whole mind of Christ consciousness put into a physical format so that it can be studied and understood and doesn't any longer have to be reinterpreted. I mean, 2,000 years ago, Jesus simply said, because he had a very short time for his ministry, whoever discovers the secrets of these meanings will find eternal life. Well, now you don't even need to discover the secrets of the meanings. It's just explain. Go by the book. There it is. I mean, consciousness is raised up enough that we're able to grasp some of these more esoteric and ethereal meanings in things, and we don't have to try and work it out anymore. I mean, you still have to work it out a bit, but, to the point where you give up, and then you give up again, and then you give up again, and you give up again, and you keep having these little moments of giving up and leaving a gap, and something else happens. But it takes an incredible amount of devotion to get to that first point where you give up. I don't know what to do in this situation. I'm just going to give up. Let something else happen that's got nothing to do with me. So 1,000 years from now, who knows? It might be like in the movie The Matrix. You want the red pill or the blue pill, mate. Like, which one do you want? You want to stay you want to stay here for another 5 incarnations, 10 incarnations, or you want to just like out of here, back in the journey of the soul up through different dimensions until finally you're back to your natural state, which is pure mind, which I guarantee you, when you have the experience of the illumination of your mind from within the circle of time and space, that might sound boring, just to be one with all things forever and ever and ever and ever. But when you experience it, I guarantee you it'll be all you ever want. It makes perfect sense because it is the truth. And that's an hour. There we go. A good use of 1 hour in time and space, I imagine.